Hi, welcome back.
Hi, welcome back. Number 17, we think.
We think we've been trying to keep track. Yes, episode 17 of the Therapy Pages podcast. So we were just talking. I think we need to have a season two. So I think this is going to be our last final episode of season one, and we'll be moving on to season
Yeah.
two.
And what a great book to
Yeah.
end on, right? I mean,
Yes.
this is the book, in case we do video also, but yeah, this is,
Building a Life Worth Living by Marsha Linehan, who,
yeah.
if you have been following our episodes or listening to us, we have referenced Marsha many, many times.
And
Um,
her DBT therapy. So yeah,
yes.
way back.
Probably, I feel like we've mentioned her probably every episode, even
Yeah,
talking about DBT or
yeah,
radical acceptance or something. So
yeah, yep.
Marsha Linehan and Brene Brown are like up there together
hmm
for me of like,
And you know what's interesting about it? And as I was reading the book, yeah, we really appreciate them. And it's like, why? Like I was thinking about what is it? And it's the vulnerability, it's
yeah,
just they're real, right? And
yeah,
with Marsha's book, like she talks about her own mental health struggles and that,
yeah,
her, family of origin issues and stuff, and how she never thought she was gonna be anything, but
yeah.
on deep down she knew she had a big message, right? And she said that a
Yeah.
lot, right? So she
Yes.
didn't have confidence at the beginning and really questioned her life, and then but really had, a lot of, like, it was almost like had this sense that she was gonna like change the world, or like just have a big impact. And I think she really, I mean, I feel like she really has, I think it's been
He
great.
absolutely has. Yeah.
And I think it's
Yeah.
the vulnerability that really helped.
I think so too. And interesting enough, I don't know why it didn't cross my mind, but so Marsha's now, I think she's like 82. So when she was kind of like creating this whole DBT program, she was creating a new program of psychotherapy in a world where women did not do that yet. So I kind of forgot that part or didn't even think about it. So I really like that she included like that in her book, and even just being a woman that people didn't take her seriously, because at
Mm,
the time it was like only men who were talking about like psychotherapy and behavior therapy and all of those things.
right. Yeah. And she talks about how she, wasn't necessarily taken seriously, and how, it also impacted her faith was really important, and it impacted her faith, and how, women aren't fairly represented. And well, she was Catholic. So, you know, and so yeah, that was interesting. I didn't really think that much about it in that context, but I thought about religion and how she really like,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know like if feminism is the right term. I just think equal rights. She
Yeah,
just as capable as men, and women are
yeah.
capable as men.
Yeah, and she even wrote a letter to someone in a church at one point talking about the equal
Mm-hmm.
rights with women and men, and how I guess the pastor of her church had addressed a lot of talking about men a lot in the church, and she even wrote a letter like, hey, women are a big part of this too. So I really appreciated that part of
Yeah,
it too.
yeah, and she ended up leaving that
Yes.
church.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, her spiritual journey throughout this whole book I thought was so interesting too, because I think
Mm-hmm.
I know personally I definitely have been struggling with that. I know a lot of my clients have been,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of where she started from, yeah, being in the Catholic religion to then going to study for. I don't even remember. It was a long time because she asked for an extension, but with about just Zen Buddhism and with monks,
Mm-hmm.
and her experience with that. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that
and
was
how
quite.
that became like the missing piece for her
Yes.
therapy, right? For her
Yeah.
program, that became it, because without, you know, well, we'll talk about it, but without acceptance, I mean, and that's one thing she said, that's how she had to learn about acceptance, and then what she later termed radical acceptance.
Yes.
And I know
Yeah.
my clients are sick of hearing that, because I said, we talk about it because you can't work on things that you don't accept, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
whether
yeah.
it's trauma or whatever it is, radical acceptance is such an interesting, I think, concept. And I think it's really important. It doesn't mean that you agree with, or that you want, or that, you're even necessarily okay with, but I have to accept that this happened, because if I don't, I'm just going to continue to suffer, so the pain happened. And if I don't accept it, I will be in suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, I'm sure my clients are sick of hearing about radical acceptance too, and just the idea of mindfulness,
Yeah.
which she incorporated, which had never been done before. She incorporated mindfulness skills into therapy, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's just so helpful for so many people. So.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So what do you, I don't know, what struck you the most about the book? Like, what was one thing you didn't know?
Well, so I had started reading this book. I think it came out maybe around COVID, maybe a little before then. I'm trying to remember the exact time, but I had started reading it a few times. So I kind of already knew how it started.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people would have been surprised. So it starts with Marsha talking about her family, kind of her upbringing a little bit, and how she started having thoughts, behaviors of self harm, and she actually ended up in an institution for 2 years. So
2 years. Yeah.
2 years, yeah. So I think a lot of people would be surprised by that. So I was not, because I had already started reading it a little bit prior to that a couple times, and I don't know why I never finished it. It was always really I always really wanted to. I just got distracted by other things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that part, I still really feel like the part that, yeah, kind of maybe surprised me the most was, or that I guess thought was the most interesting, was how many times she talked about other people, other therapists, even clients asking her, like, have you experienced any of these behaviors? Or have you experienced, like depression, anxiety? And her willingness to make a decision to come out and talk about that more, versus, like, there was, I think, so many therapists or psychologists in the book telling her, like, oh no, you should keep that a secret,
Mm-hmm.
and you
Mm-hmm.
should not tell anybody that. So I really thought that part of the book was interesting, because I think so many people have really differing opinions on that, and it goes back to things we've talked about before, about like self-disclosure,
Right.
as therapists, what things you talk about, what things you don't. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think in the time where she was, sort of coming into her own, like her early adulthood, and when she really started to think about, we need a therapy that works, because nothing that was there worked for me. I
Yeah.
think it was really solid in psychotherapy, mostly probably psychoanalytic, psychodynamic, but that, you're the idea of the blank slate. Like, you are not, you don't, as the therapist, don't show emotion, don't, share. And there's some point that she talks a little bit about that, and that just, how can you relate? And what we know now in therapy is that the therapeutic relationship is one of the most important factors in the process, right? And in the outcomes. Like, do you have a good, strong therapeutic relationship where you can be vulnerable and you can, feel supported? So that was a big shift. And I didn't realize how instrumental that she was actually in that shift
Mhm.
from the blank slate to just be real, be vulnerable. And that goes back to what I said in the beginning, like the just sort of radical honesty almost, and
Yeah.
vulnerability. Yeah.
Yeah, the vulnerability part, and I just, yeah, found it so interesting, the multiple conversations she had, and I think they were mostly, a lot of them were men, like saying, like, oh no, you can't tell your clients about that, you can't tell the world,
Yeah.
that you experience this,
Yeah.
or you won't get a job, or you won't get, this research grant, all of those, and those things were not at all true. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I probably thought that was, for me, one of the most interesting parts of the book. But
Mm-hmm.
I really, so you and I did the DBT training together back in, gosh, I don't
Oh God.
remember,
It was,
20, like 2013 ish,
yeah, it
I
had to
think.
be then, because I left the agency at 2013. So it had to be before that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we both have been, I mean, we've both done DBT groups, we both still do
Mm-hmm.
DBT individually. So I think that for me, it also was really interesting to hear her talk about all the skills in different ways, because it really changed perspective for me.
Mm-hmm.
That I was kind of used to teaching a specific skill in this way with this perspective. And now I was like, oh, I never really looked at it that way, actually coming from Marsha's own words versus reading it in a book, or someone else explaining it or something like that. So
Right.
I thought that was pretty cool too.
Yeah, and I think the title, but also it's almost like the tagline of DBT, building a life worth living. Like that's the purpose. It's not just
Yes.
like surviving, but what's meaningful. What, I want to live a life that has meaning. And maybe it's not going to be what, I thought it was going to be when I was, a kid or a teenager or even a young adult, but what can I do, to have a life worth living that's meaningful and that's purpose driven, or at least purposeful. So I think she talks a lot about that. And even, one thing that comes out of her 2 years at that institute was that, it basically was housing her because she didn't learn any skills. So
Yeah.
she did get out. I wanted to share, I underlined one of the um, breakthrough moments for her. So she had been chronically suicidal, right? And had attempts or pseudo attempts and had self-harmed. So she had this relationship with her doctor, which later she realized was maybe questionable, but it wasn't sexual or anything, just maybe it crossed some boundaries.
Yeah.
So she had gone to him frequently, and I'm suicidal, I can't do this, and he was going to go away, and she had a breakdown. You can't leave, I'm going to kill myself. And he said to her, well, Marsha, I have finally accepted that you might kill yourself, he continued. And if you do, I'm going to have one mass said for you, and I'm going to say one rosary for you.
Mhm.
And that, and then she goes on and she's like what? Like what? That's it?
Right.
And
Hmm.
then that kind of was sort of the kick that she needed to realize, oh, okay, like this has been successful in getting me the attention that I
Yes.
wanted or that I
Hmm.
needed,
Hmm.
but this isn't really living. So, and realizing that, oh well, they're just going to accept that I'm going to kill myself. And that's a big
Right.
part of
Hmm.
DBT too, right?
Yes.
So
Hmm.
not that we accept it, but it's like it you don't feed into that, right? It's like, okay, I
Yes.
understand you're suffering and and here's what I can do for you. And
Hmm.
I can't prevent you from doing certain things.
Yeah, and that's why I think, I mean, why I know we both are just so passionate about DBT, because I think in typical therapy, that's not how people would handle that situation.
Right.
And I do really think that it can sometimes be harmful, by not reacting in that way. So yeah, I
Mhm.
think I really love that part too, because it was for her, she needed to kind of come to that realization.
Yeah, and at the end of that chapter, she goes on to say, when Dr. O'Brien made his stand that day, I came to realize for the first time that I did not want to die. That was the turning point. I realized that killing myself was incompatible with my vow to get myself out of hell. I had to find a way to stop wanting to kill myself, and I did. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was just like, I loved that part.
Yeah, and she talks about getting out of hell often, right? So getting
Mm-hmm.
out of that suffering, and the way to do that is through acceptance, radical acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
as Marsha says. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of I guess people's different opinions about inpatient units, but I think a lot of times, right, that is really all they do in a lot of ways is they will provide housing and hopefully keep you safe, right? That's
More now than ever, I think, as
yeah,
we talked about our broken healthcare system. But yeah.
yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't
Yeah.
really think it's beneficial, in a lot of ways. And I know she she also talked about some really funny stories of her roommate and friends that she had met there. And
Mm-hmm.
but I do think that sometimes being in facilities like that can almost cause you to get worse in those times too, because you feel so hopeless that you're kind of just stuck
Right.
there. So
Well, and there is that, learned, whether it's learned helplessness, but it's that, these different skills we acclimate to our surroundings. So
yes,
if we're all feeling the same thing, if we're all crazy, we're going to all be crazy. Right. So, and things can be almost contagious in that environment. And
right,
you and I
yeah,
have both worked inpatient, so you see it, right?
yeah.
You see
Mhm.
how the makeup of the the population makes such an impact. You can be offering the exact same skills, exact same services, but just a shift in the personalities that are there changes everything.
Yes, absolutely. Hmm.
You can go from like people, having incredibly uh aggressive behavior and like crisis after crisis for a week or however long somebody's stay is, to a unit where everybody's like engaged in the groups and doing the things and talking to one
Yeah,
another. It's really, I mean, it's interesting that way, but she definitely, there was examples of that throughout her, talk about her stay.
for sure. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I love some of those stories. Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. What else?
So yeah, I feel like right, the just the idea of building a life worth living, it kind of also reminded me of some of the other books we talked about, like Man's Search for Meaning, and
Yeah.
how she had just such a focus on how important it is to find meaning and purpose in your life, and figuring out what does that look like for you, because it does look different for everyone. So I think that
Absolutely.
was a huge, yeah, part of the book too.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, as she started with her own healing, again, the beginning of the book is all her like early childhood and then her stay in the what was it called? The Institute, I don't know, the something.
Institute of Living.
Yeah, Institute of, what a name, right? So it makes
Living,
it
yeah.
sound like it's this like Zen place to go. But
Yes.
she talks about the importance of validation and validating environments, right? And that's also a big part of DBT. And she never felt validated growing up, and she comes to talk about that with her mom later, mostly from her mom, but honestly, I think both parents. Um, so yeah, so the importance of validation in somebody's life and the impacts of an invalidating environment. And that's right there in the DBT curriculum. So I think that was an important component. And I think things that maybe people don't necessarily think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about just, yeah, DBT in general, she kind of, I think, started with the idea of DBT along those lines of validation and finding the balance. So DBT stands
Mm-hmm.
for dialectical. So the idea of dialectics, what she says, yeah, at the core of DBT is the dynamic balance between opposing therapeutic goals, acceptance of oneself and one's situation in life. On the one hand, embracing change toward a better life on the other. This is what dialectics means, the balance of opposites and coming to a synthesis of two opposites. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like just learning that concept just changed everything for me in therapy, because if you don't first validate where you're at now and accept where you're at now, you're not going to be able to make those changes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Balancing and acceptance and change is that's it. Like, and what is one of the things that they say, I may get it wrong because it's been a while since I've, run like DBT groups, but um I'm I'm trying as hard as I can, and I can always try harder or try more or
Yeah,
try. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's, yeah, like I'm doing the best I can and I can try harder.
Yeah,
Those
that's
kinds
it.
of
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yep.
I think she added some of those in the book too. But yeah, and to know like you can replace that word "but" with and how much of a
Yep.
difference that makes, because I think so often we get just stuck. I mean, you guys have all heard like black and white thinking, and we will
Mm-hmm.
get stuck in that. So how do you find more of a middle ground?
Right. Yeah. And I think the other thing I really appreciate about some of her, presentation of her personal professional life as a therapist, sort of like Yalam when we talked about his book, is her vulnerability in being able to say, yeah, that didn't work so well. Like I realized later, like that
Mhm.
wasn't the right thing to do.
Yes.
And I appreciate that, to not say, well, I'm the expert and so I appreciated that a lot in her. That's self-awareness. And I guess that's also how she started to really be honest and develop the actual intervention and modality of DBT, taking all of these pieces that worked, didn't work, things that she knew she needed. And it's interesting throughout the book, you see the evolution of it, how different parts came in.
Yes, I really liked one at the when she was in the Institute of Living. One of the things that they used, which sounds awful, is like the cold packs.
Oh, yeah.
So they would just, yeah, put you in basically like ice packs for hours. And she was saying how everyone there hated that so much that it would like cause them to just do whatever they were asked. But she actually really liked that, because it would just help her feel calm.
Mm-hmm.
And once, so that I think that's when she started thinking about like the tip skills, which is the, yeah, tip the temperature, cold water, how it really does just slow everything in your body down, and can kind of give you a feeling of calmness. So.
Yeah. 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 She definitely, I mean, you can, reading this, you can really see how much this was like born out of her own needs and lack of appropriate resources for her. And I think that's the, honestly, I think if something is, before she even did all of the testing and the research and, all the efficacy that, she talks about at the end, which is more like, okay, here's DBT, here's what it is. But just, knowing that it worked for me, this can work for other people. She was
Exactly.
still so motivated by that vow that she took way back when, I'm going to get myself out of hell so that I can help others to get out of hell. Right. And that was just such a driving force for her. And she didn't let people like, the men put her down and say, oh no, that's not, like, that doesn't make any sense. That's not worthy. That's not whatever. She's like, no, this works. And she was so stubborn and, so sure that this was something that would really help people and make meaningful change. And she was right.
She was 100% right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and that also turned into a DBT skill. That idea of, when you're feeling so stuck, is like, can you find a way to help other people by contributing, in
Contributing.
some way? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked how she talked about through her own experience, how she would bring and, you dear man or whatever, right. Or accepts, wise man accepts, so different things. So, yeah, I thought that was particularly helpful because it makes it real. Again, it makes it like this is a real person who's being vulnerable and really open with her own experience and how these things helped. So, yeah, if it helped one, of course it can help more.
Yeah. Yeah. And just right. I think just such an amazing story of where she was to where she is now. Yeah.
And I think this was probably, she started her research on suicide and suicidality, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
where she started her professional, I guess, work, and she was a social psychologist rather than clinical, which she's very open and clear about.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that also, that study on suicide, because suicide was something that so many people didn't talk about,
Yes.
didn't
Yeah.
really look into, didn't really, look at it as a symptom or as something that is, not just a really sick person taking their life or a really sad person or whatever, but that suicidality is more than that. And she was, I think, the first person, and probably really prompted by that interaction with Dr. O'Brien, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh,
Yes.
yeah, okay. So I don't really have to kill myself to feel better. Like I can, I can do other. So I think her openness and willingness and honesty and bluntness. I think she talks about her reverence, and she just says she doesn't sugarcoat. And I
No.
I
No.
so appreciate that and how
Yeah.
that's important in therapy to not
I agree.
just say things to make people feel good. That's not
Yeah.
what it's about.
Exactly, right, and especially in DBT, I mean, it's so important, right, to, yeah, to, just be out and open with it as much as you can, and people really do appreciate that and need that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So I think her openness about suicidality and that bluntness that she brought was really very important for therapy. And some people, I mean, I've had people who have left sessions like, well, I don't feel better. And I'm like, but was it really about that? Do you feel like we addressed some things? Well, yeah. So they will eventually feel better about, kind of like what she talks about, about having opened up or having maybe said the thing that they never wanted to say or
Yes. Mhm.
whatever it is. But therapy is not always about feeling better.
No, right,
that's
it's
such
not.
a that's such a misconception.
Yeah, and I think I forget where, like, what exactly was said or where it was in the book, but she was having a conversation with, I think, a coworker who said something about like a client just yelling at her, and she was
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like, yeah, well, that's, it's what they needed in the moment,
Right,
that there was something going on that they needed to address. So I
right.
think a lot of times, right, like, previously to DBT, like therapists were very much like, oh no, like you shouldn't ever yell at me or like treat me that way, but that's, I mean, that's all part of the therapeutic process in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
yeah, Yeah. And the other refreshing thing, and I don't know how much it was because I don't recall some of the book. I fell asleep, but I mean, I have a lot of like notes that I
You
flags,
do.
but where I just lost my train of thought. So where she talks about feel, I just lost my train of thought. What was
It
it?
will come back.
It will come back. Because it was important. It'll come back. Oh well, it happens.
It does. I'm sure we'll get back to it at some point, but yeah, just her idea of like it's the therapeutic process and how DBT is modeled behavior in a lot of ways, and as a
Yes.
DBT therapist, that's sometimes what we're doing too.
Oh, I know what it was. Okay,
And then
the idea in DBT that the clients don't fail.
yes, you don't. There's nothing like no one fails. There's doing in DBT. There's a lot of homework, and the idea is the homework's
Mm-hmm.
never done wrong. If you do it, it's done correctly. Right. I love those
And
ideas.
how I think she had conversations with other therapists, or it was brought up in a conversation about, well, that person just isn't like, they're just not doing therapy, or they're not, or they're, it's their fault. They're, not doing whatever. And that is not the framework of DBT. DBT is not, oh, well, if you don't do this, then this, but we look at it. We look, well, what is happening that you're not changing behaviors, or that that this isn't happening. So it's more of a team approach rather than blaming the client. And I loved that part of DBT, because people come in with enough shame and other things that they're not good enough. And that's one thing I think that came about from her time at the Institute of Living. So that it's not the client's fault, or the person's fault. They don't have the skills, or they don't have the resources. So in DBT, it truly is a team approach. And I think that's why she had the peer consultation, the phone
Mm-hmm.
calls, right? So
Yeah.
being available for phone calls, and then the skills groups and the individual groups. So that was and when we first learned DBT, and that was one of the things that they taught us. I'm like, that is such an interesting perspective, because how many times have you talked to other therapists and they're like, yeah, that guy just doesn't want to do the work. They're like, I fired him,
Yeah.
or
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, wow, that's such a refreshing perspective
It is. Yeah, it is.
because it's
And yeah.
not your fault if you don't
No.
know, if you don't have the skills,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't have the support, or you're afraid to ask, or you've been conditioned through your life to not ask. So yeah, so that was what I
Yeah.
wanted. That was my forgotten thought.
That was a good thought. I love you remembered. And I think there is still to this day somehow just a stigma of people with borderline personality disorder. And even in therapists, I've even had therapists say to me like, "Oh no, I would not want to see a client diagnosed with BPD." And I think
Yeah,
that's just it's awful because like right then that is looking at as like it's the client's fault and they have failed. So yeah.
right. And that's another, going to diagnoses. That's another thing, because I had always been under the impression that she had borderline personality disorder, and that's how she ended up. But according to her, she didn't meet the criteria before she entered the Institute of Living, but she did after, and she no longer does. So
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't even really, I mean, from what I got in the book, like, know if she really met the criteria, but it also didn't matter to her.
Yes, I like that part of that. It didn't matter. And I think she talked about that often too, is that like, I think she said at some point, probably many of us could meet some of the criteria for borderline personality disorder, depending on where we're at in our lives. But yeah, that
Absolutely.
doesn't mean, and that there's what, seven, I think 8 different criteria
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for borderline. But so, yeah, I love that she said, right, she didn't really think that she met that prior to being
Right.
inpatient, which says, again, a lot about just our
Well,
healthcare
yeah.
system. Yeah.
Well, and a lot about how impressionable we are,
Yeah.
particularly when you're vulnerable, right? So all these
Yeah.
vulnerable people are coming together in that were admitted to inpatient units for a reason, whether it's for their safety, or they were crazy, or, whatever it is, they were admitted to this place. And yeah, so
Yeah.
that they're
And she
all
definitely did say, I think she had a very like invalidating environment. She was very different. I mean, her siblings were all, it seems like, very supportive, especially her sister. And I think her 2 brothers. But very invalidating. So she just always felt very different than everyone in her
And she
family.
was different. I mean,
Mhm.
honestly, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
she didn't marry. She didn't, relationships were difficult for her.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't. She was also into research. She didn't want to just get married and have babies. Like she
Yeah.
wanted to use
Yeah.
her
Mhm.
brain and felt called to do things, and that wasn't necessarily
Yeah.
supported. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the end of the book. So she goes back to the Institute of Living to talk about her DBT program, but she also then made a plan to talk about herself and what she
Mm-hmm.
had experienced at the Institute of Living when she was what 17, 18. And I love that they had asked her to go there and speak, and it was they wanted her to speak in this one particular room that was kind of small, and she was like, no, 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 if I'm doing this, like, I'm going big. So she called him back and she was like, I will only do it if it's in like this big like banquet room. Because she wanted to tell her story. And I think the guy was like, well, I need to know why. So
Mm-hmm.
I really loved that part. And she went back and her brothers came, her sister came to
Yeah.
support her. And she was able to talk about how she was there, many years ago and her
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Yeah, and I think the relationship with her sister was really interesting because she never felt like she lived up to her sister, and her sister was the pretty one, or the thin one, the one that was perfect in mom's eyes.
Yes. Yeah.
And Marsha wasn't. And that was I think her sister somewhere later in the book, when they were adults and really worked on their relationship and became close, um, her sister actually said to her, there was nothing you could have done, like, for
Yes.
mom to accept.
Mhm.
Like, it wasn't,
Yeah.
that isn't who you are, and
Mhm.
that was one, probably difficult to hear, but also probably incredibly validating.
Yes, yes, I thought so as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sure to hear that. Yeah, it was very validating. Mhm.
Yeah. 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 And I think that she did her own, I think that talking, and she talked about how vulnerable and how hard it was to do that talk, and even writing this book, and how she was embarrassed at different letters because she presents different letters she wrote to, and it just, I think it goes to, or shows her, just strong, emphasis and importance on being vulnerable and being your true self. And, just this is what it is, and it's okay. We are not all, perfect creatures. Even, I mean, in these days of social media, like, everybody presents the perfect face and the perfect this and the perfect that. And that life isn't really like that. And that it's okay to show the messy parts. And I just really
Yeah.
appreciate that, because that's also what DBT, I think, really talks about. Listen,
Yes.
just because you had this, or you were this way in a relationship, doesn't mean you always have to be. You can change.
No.
If you're feeling shame or guilt or whatever about this, we can change that. Let's name it and, work on
Yeah.
it.
Accept it, name it, work on it, all those things. Yes.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Acceptance.
Mhm.
Radical
Yes.
acceptance. So, and
Yeah.
the willingness to be vulnerable. And I think, that was one of the early, when we were first studying, one of the early things about, is this truly trauma sensitive, and
Mhm.
I feel like it's come a long way. I think it can be. And I use DBT skills with every client. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily do the full, like all 4 modules or whatever. Or, I guess it's really 5 now with walking the mill path. But, you know, I don't necessarily do them all, but I do parts. And I think it's a
Yeah.
very important part of, just the therapy and learning skills. Because I think the way she presents them are just so easy. And
Yes.
the other
Mhm.
thing that she said, I think I'm talking more this time than I usually do, but the DBT
The
skills
excitement.
are life skills, right? And
They
I
are,
did that
yeah.
from day one. And, Jen and I, back when we first started Bodhi, we were going into Exeter, and we were doing Exeter High School, and we were teaching these skills to the at-risk youth. And it was amazing, because they really are just life skills that these people didn't learn. Like, Marsha didn't learn these skills. She had to, growing up, rather, she had to kind of fill in the missing pieces of things that she never learned, and that really most of us don't learn. We don't learn how to
Right.
communicate effectively. We don't
No.
learn how to, process
Regulate.
behavior.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
you
And Marsha has always been a big advocate of teaching DBT skills in schools, even with,
yeah,
like elementary age kids, and just,
yeah,
I mean, learning how to regulate your emotions. Like, why are we not teaching kids these skills?
yeah. That emotions are fine. And so, I mean, how often don't cry or don't do this or, that, no, that's not, you can
Mhm.
cry. Let's talk about it, or if you don't want to talk about it, let's think about it in a different way. What's causing pain,
Yes.
or the
Mhm.
discomfort.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Would be amazing. But yeah, and I mean, I agree. I mean, DBT skills are definitely life skills, and I can't at this point. I think there's no way I would be able to do therapy without including DBT in some form or another. And
Mm-hmm.
right, not necessarily teaching every single skill or the modules, but small skills in between all the other things. So,
Yeah, I think radical acceptance is a really key component, in addition to others. But because so much of DBT is based on acceptance and the way she frames radical acceptance, like it is accepting life as it is right now without judgment, without it being good or bad, without,
yes,
right or wrong, just accepting, basically this is where I am, these things happen to me. And then, okay, what do I do? You know?
yes, mm-hmm. Yep,
Not being in the constant state of I can't believe that happened to me, I can never do this, I can, and kind of being in that constant, what would that be, like frozen, or that state.
yeah,
Instead it's like, yes, this was really hard. And she makes no like false statements that this is easy, because it is not. And in fact, she even
mm-hmm.
stresses, like, yeah, change is hard, like it's
Mm-hmm.
difficult, and it's worth it, so
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not easy. And I mean, we've had our clients that have gone through I mean, the group, if you go through the DBT group, is a year at least, right? So it's
mhm.
definitely not easy to start to learn. And you're changing your whole thought process. So
Yeah.
it's definitely not easy to learn these skills and make changes. But I think, and it's just so effective. I truly have seen DBT change people's lives.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes not until years later, right? So
Yes. Hmm.
when we ran the DBT adolescent group, and I
Hmm.
still saw some of those kids as they were, going into their, I actually still see some, but into their 20s. And they're like, wow, like when I finally decided to start really practicing mindfulness, or when I really like thought about radical acceptance, or the self-soothe skills, or like, and it's just that light bulb. So the way I look at our job is, we're providing these resources, as therapists. We have this safe container of our therapy room, and we're providing this, and we're letting them, talk about how they process them. But really, therapy and the work actually happens outside the room, and it's them going and using these skills. And sometimes you're not ready when you learn it, but
Right. Yeah. Hmm.
but if they're in there, like if the skills are in there, it's like, oh, wow, okay, I'm going to do that. Right. So,
Yes, I was definitely not ready for mindfulness when I learned mindfulness. I was like nowhere near ready for it, and I was like, "This is so stupid. Nope, not liking
I
this."
remember having that conversation with you.
And there was and she talks about resistance too, but so
Yeah.
much resistance towards just mindfulness. I'm not sure why the other, like the emotion regulation, the stress tolerance, even interpersonal. I was like, yeah, like I get this, but
Hmm.
for some reason, mindfulness it just wasn't happening until I don't know, maybe 6 months to a year after. So
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I
now,
remember that. I remember.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's like, I'm just sitting here, like, until you really, I guess, I'm just gonna sound corny, but until you like really live it, or till you really feel it,
yeah,
like it's just like,
mhm,
okay, I'm noticing my breath. What is that? Like, and she talks about doing her class, and like, okay, let's like notice our breath, noticing it. And somebody said breathing doesn't work for me.
yes,
How many times have I like, oh my God, it's so familiar. But yeah, it's like, I think
mhm,
until you really feel that shift,
yeah.
and that requires a lot of trust. So
Trust and yeah, and I think finding what works for you,
yeah.
like, because sometimes maybe breathing is not the way to start. For me, it definitely was not, until I
Hmm.
started learning other ways to be mindful, and then the breathing part made sense, to
Right.
me. So, yeah, I think finding what works for you too.
I remember during our training with DBT, we had to go to all those we had to do some extra ones to get all of those to fulfill that whole requirement. I remember one of them was, I don't remember what the training was on, specifically what the topic was, but the one that got me totally hooked in, it was really a guided meditation, but mindfulness, right? So is the mountain meditation. Like, I don't know if you remember that, but where you are the mountain and you go through
Mm-hmm.
the seasons, and I was like,
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
that was amazing for me. And I was able to be totally like drop into that in a room full of people sitting in a chair, like in an uncomfortable, like conference room chair, not
Yeah.
in, not like laying down or a nice
Mhm.
yoga mat or something. That was one, like, I felt a shift. That and
Yes.
progressive muscle relaxation. The first time I ever did that, that was like, wow.
Yeah, I agree. I've really yeah, enjoyed both of those too. I was hoping you weren't going to say, because I we went to one also that was an hour long body scan meditation.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, this is like pure torture. It felt like to me, because this was during the time where I did not appreciate mindfulness. I was just starting to learn some of the skills. And after that hour long body scan meditation, I was like, I'm never going to enjoy doing this.
Yeah.
It was like pure torture for me. So I think, right, it's so important to notice those. I mean, you can just notice those things without
Yeah.
judgment, but find what works for you. So,
Well, an hour-long body scan, I still wouldn't want to do.
I
I'm good with
know.
like an 8, 9, 5 minute body scan. Like,
Yeah.
not those really long ones. I don't get, but
Yeah.
they work for some people, right?
Yes.
So,
I think I
yeah,
could maybe do it now and not feel tortured, but back then I felt tortured. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know that I feel tortured, but I would definitely drop out. Like, I wouldn't be able to stay in it for an
Okay.
hour.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my own attention span. But
It was, yeah, it was a long time. And the woman was great. It was a guided
yeah,
meditation. She did a great job. Had nothing to do with her. It was just
yeah,
yeah, it was not there. So,
yeah, yeah. Any other big takeaways from the book?
uh, I just that, yeah, I think she's just amazing. It just really, I think, reiterated for me, yeah, just her strength, her non-judgmentalness.
Yeah.
I loved the couple of chapters where she was just practicing how to be Zen, and as someone
Mm-hmm.
called her a Zen master.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just her experiences there, even about, I think, the one woman there who was just like perfect, and she did everything like exactly the way she was supposed to, and how she was feeling judgment toward her.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was pretty funny too, because we
Yeah.
we have those thoughts. So I just loved how she just like she was like, no, I just need this time off from work. I'm gonna go and do this,
Yeah.
because she needed that for herself. So I really
Which was
appreciate.
right after she got tenure. So it was like,
Yes,
so wait, you just get tenure and you like take off and you
and
leave all
then
this work for your, coworkers?
yeah, and then she was there, and then she was like, oh no, I need more time.
Yeah.
So she asked for more time too, which was really funny. But
Right.
yeah, I think it was so helpful for her to have that time. And she talks a lot about, if you look up videos of her, that seems like that was probably one of her like best times of her life, was
Mm-hmm.
doing that. She talks about it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was meaningful. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
what, as she talks, that's what really cemented everything for her and made DBT come completely together.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are some things that came out of the book, just like ideas. So a meaningful life may include grief. It may include uncertainty and imperfection, and that doesn't mean it's the bad, or
Hmm.
it's not a meaningful life just because you've gone through hardships. And also that skills are really important, but connection. She talks about that. Like, connection is really super important, and self compassion is really important. So those are some themes, I think, that are, yeah, that are, I think it that I took away from, and I think
Hmm.
important to share.
I agree. And I mean, it sounds just like Brene Brown as well. I wonder if they've ever met. I would imagine so.
I would imagine so,
But yeah,
especially
I
with both
agree.
of them with vulnerability, and yeah, I'm
Oh,
sure.
and connection. Yeah. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. And radical acceptance.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I love the idea of just, maybe you can let us know, like in comments, like what your life worth living looks like, and how you're building that for yourself, because it could literally be anything. But how do you make your own life worth living?
Yeah, and there's one closing quote that I found that I thought was good. A life worth living may not be a perfect life. It may simply be a life where suffering is no longer the entire story. And I think that's
Perfect.
DBT, right? I mean,
DBT, yeah, 100% sums it up perfectly. Yeah.
yeah. Well, good. Hopefully people enjoyed it. I don't know if we have any, I guess we could come up with like a listener reflection to load up.
Probably could, yeah. Or
What,
just letting us know, right, yeah, I guess what skills, if you've used any DBT skills, which ones have been helpful and what your life worth living looks like.
yeah. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I feel like 100 out of 10.
Yeah, I would
I would
definitely,
say.
there was nothing, there was nothing triggering, maybe a
No,
little bit the inpatient, but not even really. Like there's no real, I think, intense scenes that she talks about. Yeah, I think it's an inspirational book. I think it's,
very much so.
and you can learn some skills. It's definitely not a
Yeah,
replacement for therapy, but you can, learn how she developed and what the skills are. So, yeah.
yeah,
So I
definitely
recommend. I
worth.
think I would say 10 out of 10 probably. I'm glad I finally read it all the way through. I'd picked it up before, but yeah. So,
Yeah, me too. So yeah, I'm really glad that I did too. And I think, I mean, even if you've learned at all anything about DBT, I highly recommend reading it because it's just so inspirational.
yeah, and even if it's not DBT, if you're just somebody who is feeling like I didn't, I'm not meeting my potential, like look at her, look at how like she just kept going. It's inspirational with in the therapy field or not. Like it's just her
Right.
story, right? Of she had this idea that she was going to create this thing, and she had this strong sense that she was going to create this thing,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
all of the obstacles that she overcame to do it.
Gosh, so many
Yeah.
obstacles. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, 10 out of 10. And
Yeah.
that's a great book to end season 1 of Therapy Pages.
Yes, I can't believe we made it through a whole season. Gosh, well, I think has it been a year almost, right?
I
I
think
don't remember.
almost, yeah. I think maybe
Maybe.
June. Did we start in June or July? I don't know.
Oh, I'll have to go back and look. But
Yeah.
yes, so we're going to maybe take a small break just because we all have a lot going on. We are moving, so we have to
Yeah.
move. We have
Yeah.
like a couple weeks. Um, so and then
But we'll
some.
probably pop on and just talk about different therapy things and maybe even what it's like as therapists to move a practice, because this is going to be really stressful. So if there's
Yeah,
any therapists out there that listen to us, we'll give you the ins and outs of changing with insurance panels and all the things. So maybe you won't have to make the same mistakes that we are inevitably going to do. But also
yes,
just therapy questions, like you said before. So just talk about
yeah.
what it's like. So,
Right. And
yeah.
if you have questions, let us know. We have, yeah, you can send us a message, send us an email, let us know any questions, anything you want us to talk about. We probably will do that, yeah, a couple times over the summer, but
Mm-hmm.
we'll be starting season 2 at some point. So yeah, if you have any books too, we have a whole list, but
We have so many.
we have so many books.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you have ideas, let us know too.
Yep. All right. Well, that was great. Good.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
See
Happy
you
summer.
soon. Happy summer.
Bye.
Bye.